made. And we'll be doing that through the performance dashboard. And then finally, if you do provide grades for discussions and make it a graded activity, I'll also show you some options there for providing feedback to the students. So really to get started here, I have a Blackboard resources page. And so I'll post that link for those that joined. I posted a link for downloading these slides. So I'll post that once again at the end of the presentation. And then pretty much any of these links here are active and you will be able to click them from the download there. So these are kind of the things that we've gone through. On some of these, I've also provided some video tutorials on setting up these tools as well. So yeah, really to get started. First thing first, in terms of creating the discussion board link in your course menu, I'm going to switch my view here so that we can go through that option here. All right, so we'll go through the steps on adding in the discussion board tool to your course menu. And to do that, you will go up right above your course menu, you will see this little plus icon, and that's to add a menu item. So if you hover over the plus icon and go down to Tool Link, you could then add in a name for the link. In this case, we'll call it the discussion board. And then for type, you will select the type of tool that you want to include here. And discussion board is what we'll select. And then you'll make the checkbox here to make it available to users. So really it's going up to add a menu item, adding a tool link, giving that link a name, and then selecting the type of tool that you want to add to the course menu. And once you click submit, by default, any of these options here, when you add it to the course menu, it is added at the bottom. So from there, what you can do is hover over the left-hand side of the link, and you can drag that up to wherever you want it to display within your course. So now that this is set, students also have access to it since we checked that little box to make it available to users. And we could then click into the discussion board itself. So I've already created a couple sample forums here, but we will go through the process and some of the settings that are there when you do create a forum. And for the forum, you can kind of think of this as kind of the weekly buckets of the discussion board posts for the week or by the topic. So sample forum names could be like week 9 discussion, week 10 discussion, or if there's a certain topic that you want to have the students discuss, you could also name that in terms of the forum name. So once we clicked on discussion board, we can then click on this button to create forum. And just to let you know, only instructors have the ability to create forums. Students are able to create their posts within these forums. So this is kind of the big overall, the buckets of where the students will be posting their comments. So if we click on create forum, we can type in a name for the forum. And for this example, I'll just call it the week 9 discussion. And this is where you could type any description you have for the forum. So this might be the questions that you want students to post on. It might be a scenario that you want students to discuss, and we'll get into this a little bit more in terms of some effective discussion questions and possibilities and uses for these. So this would be the main overall description and questions that you want students to discuss, and you would post it in this section here. For forum availability, you're able to set these up ahead of time if you'd like. So the display after dates, this would be the dates that the link would become active to students. And then if you want the link to go away from the student view, you can add in a display until dates. And then at that time, that date and time, that link will be removed from the student view. You will still be able to, as the instructor, go back and see what they posted. However, they would be cut off from viewing the forum at this time. And then we get into some of the additional forum settings here. Overall, a lot of them by default are good settings to use. However, there's some things that you could also consider when you do create these forums. So the first one is under the viewing threads and replies. The standard view means that once a student posts their thread in the discussion forum, everyone will be able to see it. However, there's this option here that participants must create a thread in order to view other threads in this forum. So what that means is that a student will not be able to see what their classmates posted until they themselves create their first discussion post. This is a good way to kind of prevent a couple students from making their discussion board post and then having others kind of model their responses and their ideas off of each other. In this way, I could show you what this looks like in a second here. What it will do is that it will say that this is a post first forum and that you must create a discussion thread before you're able to see your classmates' posts. So just to show you what this looks like, I'll leave this enabled here. Next to grade, by default, it's set for no grading in the forum. However, if you do want to make this a graded activity, you would select this box here and then put in the amount of points possible for the activity. And by doing this, when you create the forum, a grade center column will also automatically be created, and then you'll be able to put in points for each student's post through the grade center and through the grading of the discussion forums. And depending on what your criteria are for grading, right now it's set that this little prompt will be here after a student makes one post. However, if the requirement is that they need to make 3 posts in a week, you could always set that value here for to make sure that they've reached the amount of posts that they need to make each week to activate this grading criteria. You can also put in a due date. So if there is an active due date, and we'll get into some possible guidelines to give students for posting their discussions here in a little bit. But if there is an end due date, you could also include it in this section here as well as rubrics, which we have a lot of resources on in our Learning Technologies knowledge base. So you could always go to codlearningtech.org, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link to our knowledge base, and there'll be some additional resources, one on discussions in general, but some of these other tools and options that are included in the settings. Subscribe. By default, allow members to subscribe to a forum, and I'll show you what this looks like in a little bit as well. Really, this gives you a button that allows you to click on it, and if you do subscribe to a discussion forum, you will receive an email whenever there is activity or a post made to the discussion forum. So it's kind of a nice thing in that you'll be able to see if there's activity in the forum without always checking Blackboard. But depending on how active your students are, it might also be a bad thing, and that's you'll receive who knows how many emails throughout the week for each post that's being made. So you can kind of keep track of that as a kind of a preference on which way you'd like it. I personally do like to subscribe to the forums just so I know that there is some activity there, and I know that in the back of my mind I need to go and check what those students have posted. Below that are some options that are good to leave active, such as allowing file attachments. So if someone does want to attach a PowerPoint file or a Word document or any other type of file attachments, they'll be able to once this is active here. And the same thing with replying to a quote. What's nice in discussions, a good kind of strategy and an effective thing to do is to be able to highlight something a student has said, so really quoting them, giving them credit to an idea and then adding on to it. So it's a good thing to also keep this option active here as well. Forcing moderation, if this was selected, what this means is that students can make a post. However, their classmates will not be able to see what they have typed until you as the moderator have accepted that post. So depending on how much interaction and if you want to kind of screen things out a little bit, that's what this moderation would be here. But by default, leaving it unchecked would be a good thing for some class discussions, because then you're not really interfering with kind of the flow of the posts that are being made. Also, rating post, it's kind of a double-edged sword here at times too. This would allow students to rate other students' discussion posts on a 5-star scale. So there might be some benefits for it, but there's also some cons to using that as well. But that's what that option is. If that is something that you want to include, this is where you would enable it for them. So after we've created the name and title and gone through all these options, we can then click Submit. And this is just saying that I've made that post first setting active for it. So and more so that I needed to include a description. So it didn't want me to leave that blank there. All right, so now that I've included that, we have that week 9 discussion forum that can be accessed by students. So really, to see the student view of this, I'm going to enter my student preview mode right up here. And actually, before I go into the student preview mode, I just want to make sure that people have, if anyone has questions, you could either chat them using the chat box, or you could raise your hands and I'll call on you and you could unmute your microphone and ask your question that way as well. So yeah, if you have any questions, now we'll take a little break for questions now before we go on into the student mode here. All right, if you still have any questions, you could post them in the chat. We'll be able to get to it throughout the presentation here. Oh, any chance of an oral discussion? One thing for that, you could actually look at something called Flipgrid, Flipgrid. And that's kind of a video-based, you can kind of consider it a video-based discussion board where it's free to set up. And really from there, students can post video segments and then reply to other videos. So in terms of an asynchronous type of discussion, one that is more oral and video-based, that might be a good option. I know that people have used it in foundations when I've gone through that section and have kind of been surprised at some of the results that are that have come from using that that software. And let me go to the site really quick so you see how it looks. Let me share that screen here really quick. Yeah, so what happens is that students will record a video. By default, the option is that they can only record for 1 minute and 30 seconds, but you could change that so that it's as little as 15 seconds and as much as 5 minutes. And then from there, they're able to click on a reply button, and then they'll be able to reply to the previous student's video message. So one option that you could also look in for that. On our COD Learning Tech sites, there's a blog post on using Flipgrid and getting started with Flipgrid. So it's kind of a nice little tool that people are kind of surprised on how they actually get to see and hear their students throughout with some of their thoughts with it as well. So this is one option that you could use for more of a multimedia-based discussion. All right, and we'll go back to our discussion board here. All right, so we were about to go into a student preview mode for what students would see. What they would do is they would go and they would click on discussion board, and then they would select the forum in which they have to post in. So For this example, we will go into the week 9 forum we just created. And this is the prompt they'd see if you did make it a post first forum. They would see the amount of threads that are currently in the forum, but they wouldn't be able to read them until they click on this create thread button. So if I click on the create thread, type in my, whoops, and I hit enter too soon, so I've created a kind of a blank post there, but let me try that again. I'll click on create thread. So subject of my post as well as my message here as well. If it did have a file that I wanted to attach this as well, so if you did want to have students post an assignment and others comment on it, you would be able to in this section here. And then you can click on submit, and then the post is made to the board. If we went back to the instructor mode, you, the instructor, there's two views to seeing these discussion posts. The first one is a list view, and that really kind of, when I click on the post, everything that I clicked on in terms of the initial thread and then all the replies would be listed underneath there. You, the instructor, can then hover over the post and click on reply to add your reply to the message. One thing that is disabled is that students are not able to edit or delete their posts. So really, that's one thing, is that once they make it post there, they're not able to edit or delete them. You, the instructor, have control. So there might be some option, or might be sometimes if someone posted the wrong thing, or they made an accidental post like I just did before this, and they want you to clear out one of the posts that they made, you'd be able to go in and actually delete that. One nice thing here too is that in the instructor view is that if you go over a post and there's something that you don't necessarily want to reply to the students on in front of the whole class, you do have the option here to actually email the author of that post, and this will send them an email message where you can kind of privately respond to them over a subject matter that was made in the post. So I mentioned there's two views. The other one is a tree view. And really just to see how this looks, let me just switch to another section here that has a more expanded discussion board here. All right, so if I go to this discussion, and let's just go with module 1 here, then if I click on the tree view, what you will see is basically all the posts that are made in that discussion forum. And I could then click on this little plus icon to then expand the thread of the post. So one nice thing about the tree view is that you're able to track through these indentations who responded to who. So pro and con, it's pretty much just a choice in terms of which view that you find better, but just take note that there are two different options for actually viewing these discussion posts threads using this list view and tree view here in the upper corner. So now what I'm going to show, are there any questions here before we go into actually tracking student participation and adding some grades and feedback to them? So yeah, really the same thing. If anything comes up or you think of something as we move on here, type away and we'll be able to go back and respond to it here. All right, so we're back in this view. And there's a couple different ways that you could actually track the students here. If you do have a long thread and things like that, or a lot of discussion posts, it might be hard to kind of keep track of students. But a nice option here is in the course management menu, there's an option for evaluation. And then the second option is performance dashboard. So through the performance board, you're really able to kind of drill down and focus on specific students' posts. So if we go over here and I go down to my preview user, I can see that I have participated in 2 discussion forums. So if I click on this number 2, I'm then able to see which discussion forums I participated in, or in which this student user has participated in. And then if I click on the number 2, once again, I'm able to see those 2 the post of that student made. I guess let me switch view again, and I'll actually go to my Foundations course, which is a little more built out here. Just to give you a little bit more idea on how this would look for a more robust course section here. If I go to Evaluation, Performance Dashboard, in this class I've participated in 6 different discussion forums. For Module 1, I made 8 posts, and if I want to see what posts that I made or an individual student made, this will narrow it down where I only see that user's posts. So that's a nice way too of just in terms of kind of tracking a little bit in terms of the expectations that you've set. If they have to actually respond to 3 posts and things like that, you're able to see through that discussion forum right from the start if they have met that criteria. So there's more information. Once again, if you download those slides, more information at the performance dashboard link for really accessing that tool and additional instructions for that. So really the next part we'll talk through are just some ideas and strategies for actually managing these discussions and possible ways for the instructor presence there. So before we go to these slides, are there any questions about the tool in general or any settings and things like that that you'd like to review? All right, good. So we'll just kind of talk through some of these additional slides here. Things to be mindful of for you, the instructor. If you do host a discussion board activity here, I think one of the first things is really to be present. Think about what your presence would be in the board. And some ideas for that is really kind of noticing students. And I think this third option here too is a nice key option of really kind of trying to analyze them. So start off your messages. If you are replying to a student, start off with their name. Kind of notice a little bit of what they've posted and then respond from there with possibly an additional follow-up question and things like that. Where possible, quote them. As I mentioned, it's kind of nice affirmation if the instructor is pulling out a quote from a nice thing that has been posted in the board. If you find that students are starting to get a concept and starting to reply, give them a little nudge a little bit forward for additional thinking of what they're trying to get through in their discussion post. Items 6 and 7 are a nice thing here too. Invite other students to respond to other students' posts and really kind of combining that with number 7. Try to connect some of the ideas together. That might be similar thinking, or it might even be if there's 2 kind of conflicting thoughts going on in the discussion board. Invite those students to kind of have an additional chat together and even provide a sub-question for them to talk through things a little bit more. Finally, 8 and 9 also go together a bit more too. There's no need to respond to every message in the discussion board. Sometimes some instructors think that they need to respond to every single student. That's not necessarily necessary, and there's actually studies that found that the more instructors post, if they're posting all the time, the less engagement and post students would actually make. So I guess the way to think about it is really just kind of hover around, kind of guide on the side there, find opportunities where you could jump in, post some additional follow-up questions for students, do some of this activity, really do enough to be present and try to manage some of these discussions to kind of keep them going for the students. So since you don't necessarily have to reply to every message, a good strategy is to actually summarize them. So this might be at the middle of the week or at the end of the week. Make a summary of what you've been hearing students discuss throughout the discussion forums. Again, bring up students' names and how they brought up great points. And you could also even do follow-up questions from there. Scenarios are a great way to get a discussion going, mainly because you could ask for student feedback in terms of what they would do in this scenario. But then you, the instructor, could always jump in, say at the middle of the week, and something else has been included in this scenario. So how does your perceptions change if this additional item is added in here? So a lot of different ways that these could be done online. And so with that said, there's a website called Faculty Focus, and I'll show it here in a second. Let me just go to it here. It's facultyfocus.com. Type it right. This is kind of geared towards more ideas and teaching strategies. And with this, there's a lot of different topics in terms of creating engagement online, how to actually use discussions more effectively. So really, if you just go to the site and search for discussions, there's a lot of different topics and ideas that would be brought up here. The nice thing about all of these articles is that they're probably the equivalent of a 1.5, 2-page Word documents, so they're not very long. And they're also written by different instructional designers, technologists, and faculty members that have implemented some of these strategies in their course and how it has worked out for them. So really can't stress this site enough for getting some ideas and some background in some of these teaching strategies here. So let me just head back to our slides here. And really kind of moving on, some other things to kind of be mindful of. One thing that would be nice to provide the students as well is just some kind of proper etiquette, kind of a class laws for using the discussions. Also really just kind of providing some additional tip or what they can do or what they should do in the discussions. So really to check in frequently, personalize those messages by calling out their students by name and who they're responding to. Really to be specific as well. Be specific in who you're responding to as well as what topic and subject that you are posting your replies to. Focus on one subject per message as well. So really, someone might bring up 3 different in their initial discussion post. However, be really specific and just focus on one message per time. And if you do want to reply to, for example, there are 3 things that they brought up, a better option would be to provide 3 different messages there, because then that provides an opportunity for others to also return your individual messages. Open-ended questions are the way to go in terms of using discussions. More so that's, you don't want it to be where the first student post has solved the problem and that's about it. No shouting, so really some of those rules in terms of kind of annoying to read something that's in all caps. Just be mindful of your humor, because that doesn't always come across in a text-based environment or text-based messages. Also, keep messages brief. I know that sometimes I even do it myself. I get on a roll and I keep typing and typing. But one thing about that is that think about an in-person activity or an in-person discussion that you're having in class and someone's just keeps talking for about 5 minutes. That would be kind of an equivalent of a really long post that just keeps going on. So keep it brief to really enable this back and forth posting between students. And never really sharing without permission. That more so goes to sharing with outside sources and things like that. So yeah. I did post a link in the slides for pretty much an etiquette guide from the University of Florida that I found helpful. But if you search for discussion board and etiquette guides, there's tons of different options out there and ideas for things that you can include in your class. Really, in terms of the discussion board and your presence in it, you can provide guidance, provide clarity, offer assistance, provide some of that additional feedback on their posts, and really, once again, summarize so that you don't necessarily have to respond to every message. You can kind of recap the big ideas and the individual ideas brought from students throughout the week. One thing I will mention too in terms of this is that you'll find that it is pretty useful, especially if you are starting to use discussions for the first time, to actually have a really strong presence in the beginning. And one of the big reasons for that is that, one, it's showing your students that you are actually going to be a part of these discussions. But two, it really allows you to kind of model the type of discussion messages that you're looking to get from them. So you'll notice that if you start responding to students and you end your post with an additional question, things like that, you'll notice that students kind of catch on to that, and then they'll start ending their post with asking an additional question to their classmates and things like that. So start off really strong, and then once you see that students are really starting to get that type of model post that you're after, then you can kind of back off a little bit more and use some of these additional techniques of students when you want some additional ideas out of them, and then really summarizing from there. One thing that I would also recommend too, if you do use discussions, is to kind of keep a calendar and really schedule a time each day to check in on those posts. When it is online, there is more of that tendency to kind of say, oh, okay, I need to go back in and check those discussions, and I'll get to that later. But then it's a little bit easier to kind of keep pushing that off. So really schedule time to check in so that you do have that set time where you know that you are going to go in and check in with the class. And also a final option too, especially if you do summaries at the end of the week of these discussions, is really keep notes on students throughout the week. This way you can kind of keep track of the big ideas and which student said what, and you're not kind of digging around through Blackboard trying to find those individual student posts to make sure that you're going to be crediting the right students and things like that. So really helpful thing to kind of keep those notes on students, because really then that end of the week summary is kind of writing itself throughout the week. So that's really what I have in terms of the slides. But if there's any questions about any of these ways of actually hosting effective discussions or settings of the discussion board itself, now's the time where you could start asking some questions, and we'll go through some of those steps. So Georgina asked if there's links at COD for any free resources, including ideas, themes, pictures, newspapers, things like that as well. So really resources in terms of effective content or ideas for discussions. Is that what you're asking there? Okay. So I don't think that we necessarily have any COD specific resources, but I mentioned that faculty focus sites. Um, Really, if you do a Google search for online discussions or online discussion ideas, and you could even type in your topic or your area of study as well, there's tons of resources out there from various schools and um, learning resources on the web that can give you some ideas there. There was also, let me see if I can find it here. I believe in the download, um, which I might not be able to go to right now. I posted a link in this download version of the files here to something called the Discussion Board Doctor. And it's kind of a nice thing in that you can click on kind of what's wrong with your discussions, and then it starts laying out various options um, for you, the instructor, to take into consideration. So I think I have it on the last slide of this download version of the presentation. And it's kind of a pretty helpful site in terms of remediating some ideas and difficulties you might have with your discussion. So if you have any more questions, you could type them in now. You could unmute your microphones and ask them as well. Um, if not, I'll hang around here for a little bit more if you do have any questions. Otherwise, thanks for joining. We have a lot of more presentations scheduled here the rest of today, and as well as pretty much all day tomorrow as well on that schedule. So you could always join in with those and learn about some other options for your remote teaching. Yes, John, you have a question?
Yeah, I came in a little late because I was teaching a class. Uh, I didn't catch the very beginning. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want you to be redundant, but just the basic setting it up. I mean, I'm trying to get my classes set up. And were you recommending like starting a discussion for each topic because that you're covering? And titling it as such. For instance, if I'm working on a project, I would create a discussion for each project.
Yeah, that's more up to you in terms of how it would fit. I would keep it, if it is an activity, to have one discussion per week. Then students are pretty much focused on that one question or activity, and they're not clicking around to all these different forums and trying to keep track of all these different types of discussions that are going on. So I would say weekly would be a good way to go with it. Um, Also, in terms of providing some discussion guidelines for them as well, um, when you expect them to make their first post by, when they should make any replies to their classmates as well, to also make that really explicit as well in terms of some of those expectations.
So you're suggesting that students like um, have to all join in on a discussion, or only if they need to?
Yeah, that's pretty much up to you if you want to make it a required activity or not. Um,
Because
if
I mean, I teach like a studio-based class,
Okay,
so switching everything over to like an online class. I just I don't feel the need to have to force everybody to make a comment on something if they don't really need to.
okay, yeah,
But
no problem. Actually, one thing that you can consider doing then
but I could
is
do critique, like I could do like comment on, like most of the discussion that we do centers around evaluating work.
okay. Yeah, so you could always kind of do it towards that, or if in the very least too, you could always post kind of a general questions type of forum. So if there are any questions about some of the content or activities and things like that, you could always just create this general forum where it's kind of a nice thing in that students can post the questions. Sometimes students will actually just respond to um, other students for general clarity about certain topics and questions that they have. Sometimes also too, if there's any technical issues, sometimes they'll answer each other there as well. And also, instead of individual emails coming your way, you could always ask them to post general course questions in this Ask the Class type forum, and that you'll be responding to their questions here. So that's basically everyone will be able to see your response to it.
Okay, so this is just a general forum for whoever wants to. That's a good idea.
Yeah, so and also too, then you won't be getting if a link goes down or something like that, 20 individual emails. You could just respond one time to everyone there.
Okay. Did you record this and are you going to post it so I can maybe just go back and review whatever you presented? Is that a possibility or no?
Yeah, exactly. All of these are being recorded, and pretty much after they're being processed here, I'm sending them along for safekeeping as well as being shared out to everyone here as well if they
And,
weren't able to join.
and where's that repository at that I can access that if I need to refer to something?
That would be coming through probably an email from Learning Technologies.
It wouldn't be on Cornerstone. It would be through.
Um, I don't believe so. I'm not sure what they're doing with that one. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So
Well,
yeah, additional learning technology correspondence here coming up. We'll probably have links to all these recordings.
okay. Well, thank you.
Sure. Thanks. All right. If there's no other questions, I'm actually about to hop onto a different session here for online presence, which sometimes ties along here with this topic here as well, with some strategies, but other ways to really provide feedback to your students through assignments, the Grade Center, as well as announcements and various other ways that you can kind of interject your voice in these remote classes as well. So that will be through the different link here for online presence, and that's where I'll start talking here in another 10 minutes or so. So we'll go to that room. Yeah, Greg, you have a question? Yes, Greg, do you have a question? You could always unmute your microphone if you want, or you could always just chat it through the chat window as well.
I'm good, Mike. I'm just going to log off. You're very helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. All right. Yeah, so I'll close this session.